everybody. Good morning. We're going to try to make this less bouncy in a second. I hope everyone is doing beautifully this Friday. I myself am still waking up for sure, but I'm happy to be here. So I'm just, today is the Neurodiverging Coaching Q&A. And I have a couple of questions that folks have submitted. I have 2 questions today that folks have submitted to the Q&A. And if you have other questions while you're watching about neurodiversity, about parenting neurodivergent kiddos, about coaching, about anything that you've seen me do, I'm happy to take a whack. It's, free for all. But I'll start with the 2 questions I have. Good morning, folks. Hope you're all doing well. This is the kind of scheduled Q&A that I do every couple of weeks, which is just a free opportunity to talk to me and let me know what you're thinking and if I can help with anything going on. So if you have a sticky situation that you would like some coaching through, some very quick kind of hot seat coaching, or if you have specific questions about neurodiversity, about parenting, about autism, about anything related to what I do, go for it. I will do my best. I will also say that when I scheduled this, I forgot about hi Charlie, I forgot about how my summer schedule is a hot mess in terms of childcare, and so my kids are home. And so there may be some YouTube happening in the background and stuff, and also Leo's going to come over, the cat, and knock over the camera. So, we're in a happy, chaotic moment here. Hi. So the 2 questions I have are about school avoidance for a 3rd grader, and I have one about just adult autistic overwhelm. So that's what I'll be hitting today. Before I get started, I just want to thank my patrons, the 21 wonderful people who support my ability to come do stuff like this that is unpaid, and I really very much appreciate them. They also contribute to allow me to do the podcast, the Neurodiverging Podcast, to allow me to coach low-income and scholarship individuals who otherwise, just because I need to live too, we would not have the funds to coach. And also to run things like my autistic parent peer support group and, some of the other sort of free offerings that I'm able to do because of my patrons. So if you would like to support, I very much appreciate it. That's at patreon.com/neurodiverging. If you're here just to say hello and wave, that's awesome too. I'm really glad you're here. I know patronage is not for everybody. I'll also just give a shout out to, if you go to neurodiverging.com/upcoming events, that is where I have listed all of these upcoming Q&As, any classes I'm running. I do donations optional webinars monthly, mostly monthly, on various neurodivergent related topics. And there's lots of stuff there. So neurodiverging.com/upcoming events. And now I'm done with the spiel. Okay. So we'll dig into questions. The first one I have is, my 3rd grader throws huge tantrums around attending school. How can I help him? So 3rd grade is what, 8 or 9? I'm not great at grades. This is one thing about unschooling. Okay, so without, this is going to be general advice, I should just say, because obviously I don't know you or your 3rd grader, right? So you have to make decisions for your own family. School refusal is huge in a lot of autistic, ADHD, otherwise neurodivergent kids. It can be for a couple of reasons. One obvious one is to check in with your kiddo first, and then with teachers, with staff. Bullying is a thing, and it could be that his school experience is really negative, and that's definitely something that we want to get in front of. And so if he's having especially if your kiddo is maybe a little less mature than average, or has difficulty with social situations, is overwhelmed in social situations, if his speech is behind peer average, these are not problems in and of themselves usually, but in context of school, they can create bullying behavior from other kids. So that's the first thing I would check. If, as far as you can understand, he's doing okay socially at school and the school refusal is still happening, my first question is, did you talk to him about it as best you can? And, I'm going to assume this kid is, I don't have any information about if they're speaking or non-speaking, but they didn't mention particular classrooms or anything like that. So if he's in the general population, talk to him. What's going on? Why is school hard for you? There's a couple things that could be going on. One is that for autistic kiddos, sensory processing can be a big element of discomfort in an environment. And so, thank you, Charlie. I see your question. I will grab it. So sensory processing can be a huge piece of the puzzle for any autistic person, child or adult. Also, processing speed, right? So a lot of us take longer to process information coming at us. And at school, depending on the school, right? But traditional schools in the US anyway are big and busy, lots of lights, weird noises from the those little the ceiling panels that I think are supposed to reduce noise, but they make everything all muffled and it's hard to hear. I don't know if that's a universal experience, but all the schools I ever went to, including college and grad school, had those ceiling panels, and it's just like they make it so you can't, I guess they reduce echo, but they make it so you can't hear anything. And I have auditory processing disorder too, along with autism, so it might be like that's just a unique experience. But many autistic kids have auditory processing disorder, and it may or may not be diagnosed separately from autism. So that's something to look at. Ask him about his experiences. He might just be overwhelmed from the sound and the busyness and the lack of processing time, in which case it may be that giving him some outs, giving him some calm places, talking with the school psych or counselor or nurse about offering him kind of escape spaces that are, places he can go when he's overwhelmed, making school safer, right? Because if he's throwing tantrums about attending school, school doesn't feel good or safe. So it's about creating that safety. Sometimes this has to be done by switching schools. Sometimes this has to be done by switching to homeschooling or unschooling, which is what my family has chosen to do, and many other families. It's not always easily manageable. It is often more manageable than you might think. So I'm always here if anyone is sort of in the process of thinking through whether unschooling or homeschooling might be a good fit for your family. Coming from a conventional school system and you have questions or concerns, I'm always happy to talk to folks about that, because it has been such a huge change for our family and so much better for me as a parent too. Not just, I'm not driving back and forth to school functions. I don't have to keep up email and phone correspondence with like 6 different very excellent but teachers and teaching support aides and the special education person and the school psychologist and all these people that you like just have to talk to when your kiddo is in school. So going to IEP meetings, like, does anyone like those? So anyway, my like go-to answer for this, he's throwing huge tantrums, talk to him. Why does he not feel safe? How do we create safety for him? Short. Okay. Email me if you want more help. I'm happy to direct you to resources. Okay. And then let me go back, Charlie. And Charlie, Hazart. Oh, Charlie Hazart. I got it now. I'm still waking up, so please forgive me. Has written, what are your thoughts about self-diagnosed autism versus a professional diagnosis in your 50s? Well, first of all, congratulations on self-diagnosing. That's awesome. Congratulations and welcome. A lot of folks in their adulthood come to the realization that they're autistic. I'm one of them. I was not in my 50s, but in my 30s. A lot of us are identified after a family member is identified, whether we're self-identified or professionally. So there are I have actually a whole podcast on this, and so I can refer you to, I think it's neurodiverging.com/podcast index, or if you find the Neurodiverging podcast on Apple or wherever you stream. I have a episode on adult autism diagnosis and like when to do it and when not to, so that might be useful for you. But like to shut it up, it's what do you want the professional diagnosis for, right? So there are times when a professional diagnosis is really helpful. For example, you're not sure it's autism, and maybe it's ADHD, maybe it's borderline personality, maybe there's a lot of clusters of traits that are present in the autism spectrum that are also present in other diagnoses. And so if you are not confident that it's autism, it is good to run it by a professional and just make sure it's not, you don't want to be like putting in interventions for the wrong thing, basically, right? So sure, some interventions for autism also help borderline personality folks, but some interventions for autism might actually harm those folks. And so, that's one thing. If you're concerned about kind of the treatment aspect or the like putting in interventions and supports to make your life better, that's one thing. Second thing is if you need it for insurance purposes. So a lot of in the US, a lot of things are not covered under insurance unless you have that specific diagnosis. The example I always use is that when we were trying to get speech therapy for my son, who had hearing loss for quite a long time when he was a young toddler, and so his speech was very delayed, and his speech now is still pretty idiosyncratic. We could not get speech support services without either a stroke diagnosis or an autism diagnosis, which is like so bizarre because he had hearing loss. Like, you think it would be covered, right? But it was temporary hearing loss, quote unquote, and so it didn't count for insurance purposes. So if you are seeking interventions that require a diagnosis, that is worth doing it. If you are wanting to get a diagnosis because you think it's more valid than self-identifying, like, that's a really personal decision. But some folks process, like, when you go and you do the whole panel and there's all the people and you answer all these questions about your background and your life, and it can be very validating to have a professional diagnosis, but often it is exhausting and depleting. And I wish that weren't the case, and I hate to say don't do it for that reason. But a lot of our, especially as adults, a lot of our diagnosis processes are people who are very ableist and are very used to pathologizing autism and are really used to looking at, like, the quote-unquote bad parts of autism. And going through a whole, sometimes couple days, couple week session with folks with that perspective can just be really exhausting and can make you feel like crap about yourself, and it's not validating, and it's not empowering, and it doesn't help. And so, like, that's not to say there's never a good reason to go through it, but frankly, it's not something I tend to recommend. If you are confident in your self-assessment and you have the resources you need and there's no, like, other reason, it's not something like I can recommend, I guess, unless you have a lead on a really, really good, hopefully autistic neuropsych or therapist or somebody else who's going to diagnose from the autistic perspective, right? Those folks tend to be a little better about pathologizing autism because they're autistic themselves. But yeah, it's. I wish it were easier, and I hope that's helpful. Yeah, so once I heard about what ASD was, it answered questions I have had for all of my life. Yeah, so you are self-validating, right? Like, the diagnosis is already there, it's already empowering. So unless you have, like, medical questions about it, concerns that that's not actually the right diagnosis for you, like, I'm not going to say there's no reason to go get a professional diagnosis, and often they're very necessary, but it is a really personal decision, and it's not always one I recommend. Like, just as an autistic person myself who has been through my son's diagnosis, my diagnosis, and my daughter's diagnosis for ADHD, none of those were particularly empowering experiences like I wish they had been. But in all those cases, they were things where I needed the diagnosis to get access to some kind of intervention through insurance or through whatever. So I hope that's helpful, Charlie. Let me know. And yeah, if you're interested, check out that podcast episode, because I went through all that a little bit more in detail and not as rambly-ish, though I am always just rambly. That's the truth. Okay, and then the last question I have is, I think from an adult, it's like in a paragraph. I'm going to try to, yes, adult woman in her 40s. I'm overwhelmed and exhausted and can't seem to get out of the cycle. I'm worried I'll burn out and be useless. What do I do? Okay, so as many of you probably know, overwhelm and exhaustion are really, really common in autism. And if you're a woman, there is a gender component to that too, right? That many of us are taking on more work in the home with families, being paid less for our work, etc. And that can lead to burnout regardless of your neurotype. Now, you've said, I'm overwhelmed and exhausted and can't seem to get out of the cycle. So two things come to my mind immediately. The first is, what is overwhelming you? Make a list of all the crap you have to do and offload it. Cancel it, move it. This is a short-term fix. So we're going to do initial sort of triage, right? What's the emergency? Leo's going to come move the camera. Hi, Leo. So there's going to be, what's the triage? What do we do right now to sort of reduce burden so you can make better long-term decisions? And then after triage, what do we do long-term, right, to improve your daily life over the next months and years? So triage. Write down everything that you are responsible for right now, that you expect yourself to do, that your partner and your children expect you to do, that your work expects you to do, and so on. Anything you can reschedule, cancel, social expectations, meetings that someone else could, no, please don't. Hi, please don't move it. Meetings that someone else could lead, emails someone else could answer, Girl Scout leadership that, oh good, Charlie, thank you. Girl Scout meetings that somebody else could take for a month. Whatever it is, delegate it, cancel it, delay it, okay? Create some space in your calendar. This is the time to pull in friends, pull in mothers-in-law and fathers-in-law for babysitting, pull in the neighbors, just get the help that you need to get through this immediate season, and cancel as much as you can. Really look at, is going on this coffee thing or meeting with this client as important as my mental health? Okay. And often there's going to be exceptions. You have to make your own choices. But often it's like, no, it's not worth my mental health, right? And if you are a parent or if you are a spouse, think about what would your hopefully supportive partner want? Would they want you to continue to overwork yourself and overload yourself, or would they want you to take what you need, right? And communicate with them about that. Same thing for your kiddo. You cannot be a good parent if you are overwhelmed and exhausted, right? That is not where a place of nurturement for your children comes from, and support for your kiddos. Also, you are a role model. You are demonstrating to them that it's okay to be overwhelmed and exhausted as a parent and as a mother. And I personally can say I don't want to demonstrate to especially my female children, that I am going to work myself to the bone for other people. Okay? So that's just something to think about. So once you have done the triage, you have initially sort of looked at everything and said, what is the absolute priority I must do this week, and what can I cancel, delay, delegate? Okay? Then think about what is exhausting me and what is this cycle that I'm stuck in, okay? And often this is a mismatch between your expectations of yourself and your abilities and other people's expectations of you and what you can actually do. In my experience as a coach, neurodivergent people often are overestimating actually what is reasonable to get done in a day. And sometimes that's because we have, these periods of hyper-focus, and we can get done in 2 hours what a neurotypical person would get done in 8, right? But we think each 2 hours should look like that. And that's just not really accurate. Neurotypical people are also just dealing with less day to day. They have, their lives can still be very difficult, right? But they're not dealing with ableism. They're not dealing with the kinds of overwhelm that comes from masking and fatigue that neurodivergent people are often dealing with. And so comparing yourself as a neurodivergent person to what your neurotypical neighbor or mom or best friend is doing is not going to give you an accurate picture. So when you're exhausted and overwhelmed, that means that you are making assumptions about what you can expect from yourself that are not accurate, right? So really look at, what do I need to be well? And those need to be the priority. So turning away from what are the expectations of my spouse, my boss, my kids, and thinking and trying to meet those, some of which are just unreasonable, not on purpose, not because people are trying to be jerks, but just because unless you tell them no, they're going to think you can do it. Please don't bite me. And so what you need to do then is start to set boundaries and say, okay, and this is, a lot of times setting boundaries comes across as like you're being selfish and you're being, stop knocking the camera. I love this cat so much, but he really likes to bother me when I'm trying to do these things. Thank you. So Charlie Hazart, I'm going to get it, Charlie. I just keep saying Hazart as like one word and my brain is stuck on it. Has written in the notes, passionplanner.com. That is a great planner that helps with determining priorities. Thank you so much. So maybe go check that out. I also have worksheets I'm happy to send folks. If you email me at neurodiverging.coaching@gmail.com, that can help you sort of like look at what are your values and then how are you planning your life around them. And sometimes that can be real clarifying, because if your value is to be a really in-tune parent and you're never at home with your kids, that can be like, whoa, I need to fix this, right? And there's obviously lots of other values too. So looking at, Sorry, I got lost. Okay, expectations. What are the expectations around you that people have? Are those expectations actually reasonable or not? Often they're not. If you're overwhelmed, you're trying to meet expectations that are not reasonable. And that means you need to basically stop trying to reach them, which is easier said than done. But part of that is creating boundaries. And by that, I don't mean, it's not coming from this sort of like aggressive place of like, get out of my hair, I just need to take care of myself. But rather this kind of loving place of, I'm a better mom, and I'm just focused on mom because this person is, but like, I'm a better mom when I have rest time during the days. So I need to take a nap from 2 to 3, and, we're going to make that a priority regardless of stop, regardless of anything else that's going on. Or I'm a better parent when I prioritize getting home at 5 p.m. because then I can spend time with the kids before bedtime, and it engages our bond, right? Let's look at another value set. So one value that's like unrelated to whether you're a parent or not is aesthetics, right? Love of beauty in your life, right? If you kind of rate highly and that's one of your top 5 values, then what are you doing to incorporate beauty in your life, right? Are you taking care of your home? Are you taking care of your garden? Are you dressing the way you want? Are you, picking flowers? Like, what are ways you can add beauty into your life? And are you spending time on that and renewing yourself in that? So sometimes setting boundaries is like, I need to be able to get out into the garden for an hour a day, a week, however, or maybe much more than that. Putting yourself first and saying, how can I be the best person for my family, for my partners, for my work company, depending on your political interests. Like, if it's really important to you to be a good worker is going to take care of themselves and be able to say no to things that don't fit, right? And so if you're overwhelmed and exhausted and can't get out of the cycle, triage first, and that means get rid of everything, and then slowly, carefully, on purpose, add things back in. The things that don't fit with you, the things that are exhausting, that don't bring value to your life, that don't bring value to your family and your job and whatever else is important to you, say no. Renegotiate those boundaries. Hand them off to partners, friends, neighbors. Just stop participating in the thing. I had a client this week who was saying, well, spouse really cares about participating in scouts with the kids, and I just don't want to put in the time, but spouse is working. And we kind of talked about it, and we were like, well, if it's important to the spouse, they need to take that, right? It's not reasonable to ask the client to take this thing that is weighing and heavy and not really important to them. If it's important to the spouse, they need to find a way to make that happen, right? And so sometimes it can be hard. You have to say no to people you care about, but you will be a better, more together, healthier person, and you will be showing the people around you that you know how to take care of yourself. And that makes people trust you better, right? And that makes you show up on time for things and not be overwhelmed and not be constantly canceling and all these kinds of things. So if you are having trouble with this, I do check out what Charlie Hazard put in there, but also you can email me, and it's something I work on with coaching too. So if you need personalized help, you can, purchase a coaching package. But also I'm happy to send you worksheets and kind of get you started with free resources if that is a good fit for you. So so saying no can be a life changer, especially if you are a people pleaser. Yes. And that is, a lot of autistic people are people pleasers, and that's not because of our neurotype, but I think rather because when we're growing up, we have, a lot of us, there are obviously a huge range of autistic people in the world, and some of us are better at other things and worse at other things, like any other kind of person. But a lot of us have so much trouble fitting in when we're young that we kind of lean into people pleasing to try to create social bonds, to create friendships, to create relationships. And then we start to think that people pleasing is the only way that we'll get, those relationships that we need. And that's often not true. And especially by the time you're an adult, you may be partnered. You may have a really close-knit social community. You may not, but you may have a workplace, right? You have bonds. You have people who have decided that you are worth knowing. And so starting to say no can be really hard for you, but actually other people usually are used to people saying no. They might need to adjust to hearing you say it, but it's not like no one else in the world says, no, I can't do that, or, however you want to phrase it, right? Or I really need you to take this, or, you know, I agreed to this job and now I'm doing these extra activities and, you know, that's not okay with me. However, whatever you need to do. So another thing I work on with clients a lot is just scripting no's. Because I think the hardest part for a lot of people is just envisioning the how will I say no in a way that's not taken offensively. Most people react fine to hearing no, frankly, if they're like a relatively mentally well person, and not, you know, a narcissistic personality disorder or something like that. But if they're like most people are used to hearing no, I can't make that work, and figuring out a different way to do it. So it's really about you getting used to saying no. That's the hard part. But you can do it, and there are, you know, resources to help. So I hope that's useful. Okay. All right. Those were my 2 questions plus Charlie's question. Does anyone else, if you have other questions, put them in the chat now. Otherwise, I'm going to be done for today. I do Q&As like this about twice a month, sometimes on Instagram and sometimes on Facebook. I'm over there at facebook.com/neurodiverging. It's like the same material on both the Instagram and Facebook, so you don't really have to follow me on both, but sometimes I'll do a live in one place that doesn't get transferred to the other. I'm also on YouTube, and you can check out neurodiverging.com for all of my blog articles, the podcast, which is up to like almost 50 episodes. A new one just came out yesterday with an autistic therapist named Kathy Carter, who's out of the UK, and she talks about some really fantastic kind of emergency interventions for when you're about to get overwhelmed and about to have a meltdown. So if you're like me and one of those folks, and you just need to know, like, again, the triage, the short term, what do I do to not have a meltdown? That is a good episode for you. And also upcoming events are at neurodiverging.com/upcoming events, where I have, you know, free webinars, these lives that with Q&As, and autistic parent support group, paid courses and classes. I have one on collaborative parenting that's in registration right now, all about how to create a collaborative, democratic family dynamic where you are, you know, talking to your kids and they're talking to you and you're setting boundaries together. And it really helps reduce, collaborative parenting can really help reduce a lot of the push and pull that happens with parenting neurodivergent kids. The, you know, sensory meltdowns, the overwhelm from the parent and the child perspective. Now Leo's trying to get in the closet and all that other stuff. So if you have questions, let me know. And thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. There we go.